Hi, everybody, and happy weekend. Super excited to be back this week with another exciting episode of Jujutsu Kaisen. The plot thickens? Or, dare I say, in reference to Mr. Fushiguro, thickens? Sorry. That's a big boy. Anyway, excited to jump in and keep these good vibes going. I am joined, as always, by my friends, Bryan and Hana.
Hey, what's up, y'all? First off, as long as we're talking about Mr. Fushiguro, they did not need to zoom in on the lottery ticket in his crotch. I'm just gonna say that. They
Yes,
didn't
they
need to
did.
do that.
Emily!
What?
I'll pass it to
Am I
Hannah.
wrong?
On that note, hey everyone, it's Hannah, and I have another freaking anime character to add to my simplest. This guy's kind of a jerk though, so it keeps him a little bit lower than others, so that's helpful.
Yeah, it's okay sometimes to love something that's bad for you. That, by the way, do not take that as actual advice. I am not a therapist. This is a good episode, and we do get a lot more of this character that we know is bad for us. But we don't start there. We actually open with Geto again, and he's having his little Kermit moment here. He's pouring the tea, while one of the extremists that we saw at the end of the last episode, who was after the Star Plasma Vessel, is actually detained in the same room as him. And the detainees, given like the classic villain speech, like, "You're gonna regret this, the strongest one of us is going to come get you, and you and Gojo are going to regret what you've done." And he just, at first, like, pretends to not even hear him. And then he responds with, like, a classic, like, "This you?" on the phone. And you see the guy that he's, like, talking about is, like, all clearly beaten with Gojo posing with, like, a bunch of peace signs. And it's just a funny open to the episode because we left the last one with a build-up that it was almost going to be kind of a big fight, right? And then it seems like they pretty easily took all of these people out without us even seeing. What do you think of this scene and how it is kind of anticlimactic for these new antagonists as well, these like extremist groups? What did you guys think of this?
Well, I think it was obvious that Gojo and Geto were kind of going to overpower them. I was a little disappointed that we didn't get to see any of the fighting. It was just like before and after. But it was hilarious. I was dying laughing. I usually am someone who's like, I'm not usually a huge fan of shows that, are present day, so we're using cell phones. I like to go back in time when technology's not quite as advanced, but something about him being like, "This you," with the phone and Gojo with the peace signs, that was peak comedy. I loved it. And also, a side note, that cursed energy, whatever, that was like, lick, kiss, grossed me out. I was like, I couldn't even focus fully on what was happening because of how gross that situation was.
I thought it was really nice to kind of see that. I think it really gives a characterization of how strong these two are. I think we kind of forget, and I think going back to the last episode, Gojo said we are the strongest, right? So that's just a further exemplification of that. Also, when he was making his tea, I'm pretty sure he was having passion tea, and he also added a cube of sugar to it. So he's definitely not a psychopath, we can confirm, because only black coffee drinkers are psychopaths. So keep that in mind. Black tea drinkers.
That's right. Those of you out there, sorry, not sorry. That also goes for Black Air Force Ones, I believe. Anyway, I feel like Fushiguro would wear Black Air Force Ones. But yeah, it's like these poor antagonists like really don't even stand a chance so far. And we kind of knew that because they were kind of like clowning on them even in the first episode. So obviously that fight kind of went down without a hitch. And, while they're having this like easy defeat, we cut away to my problematic favorite, Mr. Fushiguro, who is seated and is gambling on a race. Now, we see him do this throughout the episode, and I think it's important to pay attention to what's happening in each of the races and who he's betting on, because there's a lot of foreshadowing happening here that I'm going to put a pin in, and we'll come back to that later. But he's sitting there, he's gambling. We saw at the end of the last episode that he was hired to take down the Star Plasma Vessel, but he hasn't really lifted a finger yet, claiming that he knows that he can't take Gojo alone. And he can't take him head on, so he's put out a bounty to send some distractions to wear him and Geto down first. Is this smart, or do you think that the two boys are smarter and they're going to figure it out?
Oh, I mean, that's the only way you're going to be able to deal with it. Like, you're not 100% against Gojo. Like, you are at a disadvantage. So at that point, putting the distractions out there to hopefully take on, like, the beast as it's, like limping along is probably your best shot. While I think it's absolute BS and it's not honorable, I don't think Tanjiro would fight this way. I don't even think Zenitsu would fight this way, let's be real. But hey, that's my take on it. I think hopefully our boys are going to be smarter to figure out some things amiss.
I mean, this is how Muzan would fight, let's be real. And it is how he does it most of the time. He sends pursuers after Tanjiro because he's scared of him. But, Demon Slayer pointer. How many times do we bring up Demon Slayer when we talk about Jujutsu Kaisen? First of all, the whole foreshadowing note, Emily, this is, again, new territory for me since I haven't read the manga, and I was like, I should probably be paying attention to this, but the problem was I could not read fast enough with the subtitles, with, like, the placement of the race happening, and then, like, what was happening in the conversation. So I just gave up on the placement on the race. Do I need to go back and be reading those?
I would say it could be worth it. I think it's going to be really interesting to... It may not come back for a little while.
Okay.
But who's he betting on? Who wins?
Noted. All right.
Interesting.
Well, good to know. I do think he's being very smart. It's, like Bryan said, not the honorable way to fight, but it is one way to do things. He very clearly states that he knows Gojo is stronger than him and that he can't take him on. So he's really having to think outside the box to make sure that he can take them on. So it makes sense. However, do I think the two boys are smarter? I don't know. I feel like we're definitely building up that they're extremely strong, and they are very smart, as we see later in this episode. However, I think at some point a shoe is going to drop in this short arc, and something is going to happen that kind of will humble them a little bit, personally. Maybe.
I think both are fair assessments. We're going to
I
have
could be
to
totally
wait
wrong.
and see. We're going to have to wait and see. But clearly they are dealing with, like, a highly calculated approach by their opponent, because he's barely done anything yet, and he wouldn't just get hired directly by some of these associations without having proven himself in some capacity. So, little bit of foreshadowing there as well. An interesting character for sure. But a quick additional question here. Shiyu, who's the representative that's communicating with Fushiguro, asks him how Megami is. And that is a very familiar name for everyone who has seen everything else so far, but not somebody that we've seen in this season. And then larger Fushiguro either pretends that he doesn't remember, or he genuinely is like, who is that again? What do you think about this? We know that they share the same last name.
This is one thing I've been spoiled on, so I know his relationship to Megami, but I won't say it just for those listening, because it obviously is going to be revealed at some point soon. I think he's pretending, because wasn't it right before they said that he is a sorcerer killer, right? Well, Megami would be pretty young at this point, though, so I don't know. I think he's pretending to not know, or to forget who he is. I don't think he's actually forgotten who he is, but that's just my anime-only guess.
Yeah, that boy's a leer, as they say. Let's be real. Like, we kind of established this in the last episode, right? The large sorcerer families are the Zenin family, the Satoru family, the Fushiguro family, right? So you're not going to be in one of these big sorcerer families and not know who else is a part of the clan. Like, that just doesn't make sense. So there's clearly something amiss. Maybe he is, the bad guy of the family. You never can know with each anime character, but we got to find out. I'm sure he'll tell us in his own way.
I think so too, and I'm interested to see how and when any of our main characters that we know and adore that are in the present day of this happening may come into play again as we go through the past here a little bit more. But so we're done here with Fushiguro for a minute. As we cut back to Gojo and Geto, we see the star plasma vessel, or we should probably call her by her human name now as we learn it. Her name is Riko, and she wakes up in Gojo's arms and gives him a good beating, which I thought was hilarious because he does not usually get that kind of reaction from women. And, she kind of launches, into her monologue, even once she realizes who they are, about how she feels about this assimilation process that she's going to have to go through for Tengen-sama. What do you think about this new fiery character and her introduction now that she's awake?
I love her. I mean, she's the only one who can get away with doing that to Gojo. And I mean, let's be real. I think he definitely needs it. That arrogance needs to come down a little bit. But I like her so much already, just by seeing the way that she responds and that the way that she carries herself in these small interactions. Because, of course, right, this assimilation process means that she's giving up her consciousness, or, her consciousness is essentially dying. So, to be able to at least lash out in your final moments, it's brave. I like it.
Yeah, I was surprised that she was so fiery. I, from the last episode, was expecting her to be a bit more just like chill and just kind of accepting of her fate, but she seems to be someone who's very full of life and still wants to live life. She was stating very passionately that she was going to live on, that he was, she was going to become him, but he was going to become her, and her thoughts and her heart was going to continue on. And we'll see if that's actually true or not, but I love that she reacted the way she did with Gojo. I agree with Bryan. I think he needed a little bit of that because he's very, very cocky now. We know that he continues to be cocky in the future, but I think he is going to lose some of that based off of what I remember from season 1. So maybe Riko is part of the reason why he gets a little bit of humbling. She's an interesting character. I'm excited to see more from her.
I think those are also completely fair assessments. I like her a lot. She is definitely different than what I was expecting, although her opinion of the matter also surprised me a little bit in that she seems like very eager for the opportunity. She's like, you normies wouldn't understand. Like, this is like a huge privilege to be chosen for something like this, even though it means like the end of Riko the way that she currently exists. She seems okay with it. She seems like she's consented to the whole thing. But while she gives this big speech and while she talks kind of big, in the same breath, she's very eager for her bodyguards to give her permission to go back to school so that she's able to spend some of her last truly cognizant days with her high school friends like a normal girl. I feel like we've seen a similar trope to this in a number of other animes. But what do you think about like this character in particular, and then also characters who are coming of age and barely get chances to just be normal kids?
I think she's very aware that she doesn't have much time left to be a kid, and that's why she was so eager to go to school and hang out with her friends. I think, she's very eager to do the thing with Tengen-sama, but she's also probably deep down, she knows that her life is never going to be the same if she even knows of her existence at this point. And she's holding on to those friendships. I think she's cherishing them very much based off of how she acts. And this is a very common trope in anime. I feel like every single like shonen anime that I've ever watched, most of the cast is kids. And none of them are getting to be kids. They're having to grow up super, super quickly to face whatever challenges they're being faced with, whether that be demons or titans or saving the world. Like even if you look at Gojo and Geto, like they're in high school right now, so they're probably still, I mean, I know school in Japan is different than here, but they're teenagers, and Gojo has the weight of being like the strongest on his shoulders, and I think that's why he has Geto, because Geto at this point is able to take that on with him so that they can be kids together. But it's a very common trope, especially in shonen anime. It's really tough to watch these kids just only get small moments of actually just being kids and having a good time, and it makes me very emotional. I'm like, can we let kids be kids at some point, please?
No.
Absolutely
not. Not in these stories.
Not in anime.
Yeah. Definitely. This I feel like kind of this part kind of reminds me about Takemichi in Tokyo Revengers, because he is going back, while a very selfish reason for him to take on his own journey. I think it's very similar because Riko still is doing this out of selfishness, right? She thinks that this is an honor, and she thinks that this is something that's important to do for the world, and I think that there is a little bit of self-interest in that. So I definitely think that watching these moments of people essentially growing up too fast is difficult, but also I think when does it happen, right? There has to be a point in which sometimes people lose their innocence, and while it's really sad to see, unfortunately, sometimes just the earliest of ages get the hardest of lesson.
100%. I do think that that is, like both of you have said, a very key trope in so many different shows, and especially in anime. The one that actually came to mind first for me was To Your Eternity, which is I don't know if it's like as popular as some of the others, and admittedly I've kind of fallen off with the second season and I need to catch back up. But the first season like really sat with me for a long time because there are a number of different characters who experience this, but the first is a really, really little girl that is chosen kind of for something that will cause her to like lose herself in a similar way, and it's like her reaction is just like a small kid to it is like heartbreaking as the viewer, because you just want the chance for them to like be able to do that. And maybe we feel a little bit more separation when it's a slightly older child like this one. She is still a child. I don't know, there's something like really, really melancholy about it, even if she feels like it's okay, if she truly feels that way. But she's resigned to her fate, so there's only so much that Geto and Gojo can even really do at this point, aside from their job, which is what they're going to do. They follow her to the school so that she can, live out these last couple days the way that she wants to. And at the school, Geto encounters a curse user who actually manipulates a similar cursed energy to the one that he uses. But Geto is able to take him down pretty easily. We see like a cool sequence in this school hallway. And then we see from the POV of the antagonist that there's like a scene with him and like his corgi, and he's like, I thought you died 50 years ago. And it takes him a moment to realize that this is like his life flashing before his eyes and like lingering on one moment in particular. Do you think that this life flashing before his eyes is like just happening for him, or is this part of Geto's curse technique so that maybe his victims don't suffer? If you think it's part of his technique, do you think he's a little bit of a softie?
Oh yeah, I think it comes back to the opening a minute and a half that we talked about in the last episode, right? His curse technique talks about how, absorbing it tastes like the rag comparison, and I think he doesn't want anyone else to have these experiences. While he understands that he's quote unquote the good guy in this situation, the bad guy doesn't deserve the additional pain on top of being corrected for their wrongs in this moment. And so I think part of it is like hoping that they find some happiness before they leave this earth.
Yeah, and it continues to pique my interest. Just like I said in the last episode, like I can't wait to see the puzzle pieces fall into place as to what happens with Geto, because it seems like he's just a really like, he's pretty quiet, but he's got a good heart. And it also makes me feel like maybe he's going to turn more into like an Eren Yeager type thing where it's like protagonist, antagonist, nobody knows. I guess that's a spoiler for Attack on Titan season 4, but
no, it's not.
Season 4 has been coming out for 10 years now. So.
Exactly. Yeah. Season 4 has been coming out for infinity. It's just never ending. It's the Mugen season. But I think he is giving that person an opportunity to share a memory of their life that means a lot to them. But also I feel like it kind of sidetracked the guy because he was jumping in on him, and that kind of allowed Geto to get the upper hand on the fight. So maybe it's just part of his curse technique and he uses it to manipulate his people. Who knows? I'm still figuring that one out too. I just don't know what's happening.
We're gonna find out. Something that JJK does really, really well is all of this like foreshadowing, and I think like the build up to the climaxes are always worth it in this show. And I'm great. Well, it's hard for me to say because obviously we haven't seen the show yet. I'm talking about the manga, but I have every confidence that the show is going to do it really well because the season's off to a great start. So getting to see Geto's curse technique in this way is really cool, especially so early into the season. But he doesn't end up killing this guy because he wants to get some information out of him. And he's asking, like, essentially what's going on with Rico. Geto is able to get the cursed user to confess, and this is when he discovers that there actually is this bounty on Rico's head, so all these people are going to be swarming them to try to collect this bounty, right? So he calls to try to communicate this to Gojo, who is currently dealing with another cursed user on his end that can create viable clones of himself, so, he's kind of going through it over there as well. But this is where we really get to see Gojo shine for the first time this season, and we get to see some of his curse technique as well. We know from the future that he's the strongest, but this is set in the past, and he is still very young. So what do you think of his infinity technique and his limitless demonstration here? How does it compare to how polished we know it is by the time that we're in season 1?
I think it's one of the reasons why I think he's going to get humbled in this arc, because it's clearly not fully developed yet, which is fine. He's a student. That means things aren't developed yet. Like, he's still learning. He's still growing. But he was still very, like, I loved how he was like, Akka, like the red, whatever. And then it didn't really work. And he was like, I failed. He's like laughing at himself. At least he doesn't have to take himself super seriously either, I feel like most people, when they fail like that in the face of an enemy, like an actual enemy, they'd be like, like freaking out. And he's just like, nah. It's still very strong. It's still, surprising to the enemy. It's surprising to Rico. So it still is clearly very, very strong. It just needs some work. I look forward to seeing that develop, maybe, if we get to see it develop more.
I think it's really tough, right? Because at the end of season 1, we see his curse technique destroy what looks like to be like 2 miles of forest, right? And it's purple. So we know that there are 2 things from that, right? First off, being able to just release it first, right? There's the issue there, but also the colors. There has to be a difference with the power level in that, right? Because we've seen anime blasts, right? We know Kamehameha Kaioken X2538 is different from the original. So there's that too. So with that being said, right, we know that Gojo is still demonstrating this cockiness that he definitely needs to take a step back on, but still, I think it talks about how the problem is that knows he's the strongest, but does he have the consistency to execute on it? That's where the question lies, and I think that's where he still needs the refinement.
Yeah, and even if consistency isn't like 100% everything that's going on, it's like he's just young and inexperienced right now, right? So he's not as polished because he hasn't had the lived experience. But I agree with the moments that you called out, and in particular, Hana, like the red moment and then the fail. It's so funny. It's like so high school boy. But something else that I noticed that I really liked was kind of a smallish detail, but like he has this infinity technique that means like basically things can't touch him, right? And I liked how far away it was from his body this time, because we know in season 1, which is set in the future, it's like it's very, very close to his physical body, which probably requires like a lot of exertion and a lot more skill. And it's like, it's not to say that they're like any less powerful, but it probably would be a lot more confusing for an enemy getting that close to him and still not really being able to touch him. Then right now it seems like it's like a couple feet perimeter from his body. So I think that's cool, that little feature that they have shown that he improves upon.
Can I make a quick theory?
Yeah.
Really quick? I think it has something to do with his covering of his eyes. I feel like, I might be way off, because it's been a minute since I watched season 1 as well, but like he wears a blindfold. Not like, he wears sunglasses some of the time, but here like his eyes have been way more like open to just like everything around him. And I know his eyes, I because he mentioned like he can see whatever. I don't understand the technique yet. I'm sorry, guys, but I feel like maybe part of what he has to learn is to keep them covered more often. That's just my theory. That'll help him get stronger.
Very good theories. We're going to find out more, albeit not everything this season, but we're going to get a good amount, I think. So we've got kind of like these 2 fights going on, and who knows how many more might be coming because of the bounty. But Rico is there with Gojo as he's, made quick work of this cursed user that's there. But she gets a message that Rico's caretaker has been kidnapped, the maid. What do you think? Who's behind this? Is she going to be okay?
No. When you get kidnapped in anime, you're not okay. We watched Johnny finally finished Death Note last night, and it was Takada-san who was kidnapped. She was not okay. So I don't think she will be okay, unfortunately. I think realistically, if you look at it, the chances are not looking good for her.
I agree, because earlier in this episode we had like a little touching moment with Geto telling her that she is her family since Riko's family died young, and so we're getting our heartstrings pulled a little bit for this character, but she's not like super important. So yeah, I think her fate is not looking great.
Yeah, JJK has pulled on our heartstrings and has led our thoughts astray in the past. Season 1 was kind of rough with some of that, with some people who were featured in the opening that did not make it.
That was mean.
And so, what that means is like they've set this precedent that like, and there's a reason it's earned a spot in what people are calling like the Dark Three. It's going to subvert expectations, and it probably is not going to end happily for everyone, the way that sometimes things kind of button themselves up. So we'll see. Hopefully she's okay for now, but at least she's like an incentive for Gojo and Geto to get over there with Riko. So more to come next week. But it's about that time. Any final thoughts before we jump into our favorite moments? Cool. All right. Well, I will go first. I loved the scenes with Toji, Fushiguro. I love that big beefy man, even though he's so bad. I am so excited to see more of him, and he hasn't even really entered the game yet, and I think that he probably will in the next episode. I'm hoping that my guesstimate is correct, but I think we're going to see some intense stuff next week, and I'm really looking forward to it. But I really liked him kind of being goofy as well. It's like he's clearly not a good gambler, but he is gambling, and it seems to turn a little bit better for him by the last one in the restaurant, and I liked him, like, intimidating the shop owner or whoever that was. He breaks the bowl of ramen, he, like, doesn't finish his food. And there was something even eerie about, like, his chopsticks, like, slipping in the takoyaki that he, like, left behind. There was, like... The shot lingered on that for a minute, so who knows? Maybe some more foreshadowing even there, but I like him. I was
wondering that. I was like, I actually went back and rewatched the scene that you're talking about, because I was like, I feel like I just missed a bunch of things here. And I think I did, but we'll see. My favorite moment is when Gojo pops in on the chapel. And it's so funny because he's all like trying to protect her, and all of Riko's classmates are like, "Is that your boyfriend?" And she's like, "He's my cousin." And they're all like hard eyes for him, and he's like a shonen boy living in a shoujo world, like being all like, "Hello." And then the teacher is like, "Stop! You're being like, you can't be here." And then he goes, "Here's my number." I mean, honestly. No one can blame her.
High school teachers giving children phone numbers.
Literally, I was like,
don't condone.
But it was funny, though.
I died. It was awful, but hilarious.
I think my favorite moment is actually in the opening scene, and I think it's going to be with Geto's curse with the lick and kiss me. We've known at this point that I love the creepy horror stuff, and I think there's something to be said about like affection to the death, or affection to repulse someone. I think it's a really interesting play on how, we've discussed that Geto might be a little bit of a softie, but we also haven't discussed the desire of Geto, or, I guess the desires of these characters, and the desire of curses as well. Is there a correlation between, his emotional heartstrings and possibly this theory we've developed of giving his, victims a moment before their death and the, affection of a curse that he might use against someone? Or is there a correlation to their most needed emotion and what the curse comes out as? Who knows?
Excited to see more of all of these new and old but new to us in this current state characters, and I think we're in for a big one next week, if I'm correct. So we're gonna see. But until then, all we have left is this week's Taisho era secret. So this week's secret that I read on the internet, and that could or could not be true, is that allegedly Sukuna's fingers taste like soap when Yuji eats them. So I read this recently, and it seems to be kind of a small fact, but I guess that makes them a little bit more palatable than what I imagined when I saw those nasty things. Cleaning his mouth out with soap for real.
Takes me back to my childhood.
Literally. But I get, yeah, that's not as bad as I thought. I thought they were going to taste like mummy fingers, to be honest. Which, you know, not to say that I know what that tastes like. But
Tell us about
curious.
your long experience with tasting mummy fingers, Emily.
So I don't know, but I guess this is a secondary Taisho era secret, is that the reason that there are so few mummies left in the world is because Victorian people in England used to purchase them, and they would actually have mummy eating parties because they thought that there were like health benefits, and that's why they are considered kind of rare and elusive. So that's kind of disgusting, but maybe they would know better than me. That is true. You can Google it.
Yes, we'll have to pull a Takamichi and go back in time to find out.
I'll probably skip that one. Thank you though anyway.
Asha, where are you?
All right, guys. On that note, we will see you next week. Thank you so much again for joining us. And if you've enjoyed what you've heard today, please don't forget to follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Hashira Half Hour, and you can follow us on Twitter as well at Hashira Half. We are on YouTube with the podcast, and of course, all of your favorite podcast outlets to listen to this like you are right now. We love to hear from you, so please leave a comment on the podcast or on any of our videos about what you liked, maybe a question you'd like answered, or some predictions that you might have about the future of this season. Until then, that's all we have, so we will see you next week. Umai.
Umai.
Umai!